due to their nature, you'd almost expect funeral homes to be places where some sort of inexplicable activity would happen. Employees, relatives and friends of the deceased, and even people purchasing former funeral homes have reported strange paranormal events in and around the properties. After some digging around the web, I have found some of the most creepiest accounts that have allegedly been witnessed by people in funeral homes around the world. Now, while I can't vouch for their authenticity, they really are unnerving and make for thrilling reading. So kill the lights and pull up a chair as I give you 5 of the most creepy things experienced in funeral homes. Friends forever. The niece of a former employee whose job it was to wash and dress the deceased at an undisclosed funeral home shared her aunt's most chilling moment online. The body of a young woman who was killed in a car accident was brought to the home earlier that day, and the employee, who we will call Jean, had begun to wash and prepare the body. Her niece noted that as Jean works with the body, she will speak to it about anything and everything in order to, as she put it, keep the deceased company as they transition into the spirit realm. After a few hours had passed, Jean heard someone enter the reception area. She knew that she was the only one available at the time, so she began to finish up and softly told the deceased woman that she would be back shortly. As Jean entered the reception area, she was met by another young woman who looked to be frantic and in a state of shock. Jean greeted the woman and asked if she could help. The woman had asked where the deceased young woman was by her name, to which Jean informed her that she was in the back being looked after and tended to. The young woman informed Jean that she was the deceased woman's best friend and had wanted to hold her hand through it all. Jean reassured the young woman that her best friend isn't alone, telling her that she would personally see to it that she wasn't alone and that she was very sorry for her loss. At that moment, the phone rang, and Jean excused herself to answer the call. But before she could, the young woman was seen to smile and had asked Jean if she would hold her hand when her time comes. Jean went to answer the call but had missed it, so turned back to reply to the young woman, only to find that she wasn't there. At that time, Jean wasn't really fazed and had assumed that she'd left pretty quickly, so went back to the phone and returned the call. It turns out that it was the hospital calling to inform the funeral home that they were sending another body of someone who had recently died. A little while later, the body had arrived, and when Jean took the body in, she was stunned to see that the body was that of another young woman who looked uncannily similar to the woman she was talking to a short while before. When she was talking to the men who dropped off the body, it was revealed that the deceased young woman had died from her injuries in hospital that she had sustained in a car crash earlier that day. Even more creepy, she was the other young woman's best friend, and they were both in the same car when it had crashed. A little creeped out, Jean took the body into the back and had positioned it beside her best friend and clasped their hands together before she began to wash and prepare her body too. Now, as far-fetched as this story seems, Jean's niece tells us that Jean insists that this is truly the creepiest thing that she has ever experienced during her time working there, and that she's never had any other paranormal experiences prior to or following from that time. Message from Beyond the Grave. In a story shared on a popular online community, a man describes an unexplainable event he witnessed at his great-uncle's funeral, who he referred to simply as K. The funeral was held in what he described as a decently sized funeral home, with the main room being spacious and well lit. After having spoke with some relatives, he, his sister and his mum went over to the casket to pay their final respects and to say goodbye. He noted that he was standing between his mum and sister and said that when they began to talk about their uncle, reflecting on his life, he saw a white feather fall from above and slowly float down to his uncle and vanish just before it would have landed on him. The feather was described to be unusually bright with a soft glow and appeared to be too bright to have been lit up by the lights in the room. He looked up and around the room to see where it could have come from, but couldn't find a logical answer. When he peeked into the casket and looked around outside of it, he couldn't find any obvious signs of the fallen feather. It wasn't until when he and his family got back home that he asked both his mum and sister if they had seen the white feather too, but they hadn't. A few weeks later, his mum went to visit his great aunt, Uncle K's sister. While there, she told his aunt of what he had saw, which made her cry. She went to fetch a round glass orb which contained white feathers, and attached was a remembrance poem, which she took to be a sign from her brother that he was okay and at peace in the afterlife. Shortly after that, his mum went to look after his great-auntie's pets, as she was staying round at a friend's house. It was at his great-aunt's house where his mum had shown him the orb, and it was then that he confirmed that the feathers were identical to the one he had witnessed back in the funeral home, except that these ones weren't as bright. Spiritually speaking, a white feather that is found in an unusual place without any explanation is said to be a sign from an angelic entity, telling people that they are nearby, and it tends to happen during a difficult period such as a time of mourning. Have you seen anything like this before? Let me know your theories in the comments below. The Angry Poltergeist. A woman called Hillary, who was attending what she described as a Christian rehab group for addicts, claims to have had a scary encounter in 2017. The rehab group had recently purchased a disused funeral home across the road and had sent some of the resident women over to help clear out the items in the attic. Due to the dusty nature of the attic, Hillary left to go back across the road to fetch her inhaler should she encounter the onset of breathing difficulties caused by the dust. When she returned, the two other women who were in the attic looked a bit spooked, and it explained that whilst she was gone, a heavy glass beer mug had been thrown across the room with no logical explanation as to who threw it. Naturally, Hillary met the claim with some skepticism and put it down to a prank, and so the three of them began sorting out the items again. Then, what was described as a small dog or cat carrier was seen to lift up and be thrown across the room by an unseen force. Spooked, Hillary's natural instinct was to flee the area, but the other two women insisted that she was to stay, hold hands, and pray the spirit away. Whether or not that worked is unclear, but Hillary reports that she doesn't recall anything having happened after that, and that she remained close to anyone else who was in the funeral home throughout the day. The Shadowman. An undertaker in Germany with more than his fair share of spooky encounters recounts an experience from a late-night body pickup. It was around 2 a.m. when he and his colleagues had got back to the funeral home and placed the body into a cooler, which is located in a room he calls the hygienic area. After having done that, he went to his dimly lit makeshift office area, which is separated from the rest of the hygienic area by a wall of caskets which are stockpiled and awaiting use. As he was filling out his paperwork, something caught his attention to his left. He looked up and was startled to see a black, shadowy figure silently looking in his direction. He nudged his colleague and drew his attention to the figure. The both of them saw it, standing there silently, watching them. Thinking that it could have been another colleague, he called out to it but got no response. He called out once more and again was met with silence. Owing to the fact that their funeral home has had intruders in the past, he and his colleague cautiously approached the unknown entity. As he drew closer, the shadow figure turned away and audibly moved away from them, around the corner and out of sight towards the cooling unit. The two men quickly followed, and when they turned the corner, no one was to be seen. They searched the immediate area and could find no sign of anyone having been there. There was a big heavy door which, when examined, remained closed and locked. There was also a window which is barred up, making entry and exit through it impossible. Furthermore, access to the window was blocked off by clutter, which would mean getting to the window would have taken time and caused a lot of noise. After looking around, they could find no one or no logical explanation as to who or what the dark shadowy figure could have been, and to this day remain convinced that what they saw was a ghostly figure. The Phantom Caller. This is the shortest story that I've found, but by far the scariest. An anonymous man, somewhere in the United States, was woken up at 10 to 5 one morning by a creepy phone call which left a message. Listen to this. Perplexed at the unusual message, he took note of the number and entered it into Google to see if he could find the origin of the call. But what he had found had caused the hair to stand on the back of his neck. It was revealed that the eerie message had come from the Kalapaki Bay Funeral Home located in Hawaii. What's more is that the number the call came from was no longer in service. When he posted his story and the audio message onto Reddit, users quickly began analysing the audio file, with some theorising that it's a distorted digital voice, perhaps a prank or telemarketing scam or an EVP caused by a spirit that is attached to the man or his property in some way. Others have tried cleaning up the audio and have said that they can hear the voice say things like, "I can come to your house," "Not really," "I won't hurt you," and "Give me a call." Either way, it's divided the opinions of users on Reddit as to what it could be, with no clear explanation as to who's responsible for it or why it was made. What do you think? So there's 5 of my favourite most creepy funeral home stories. If you've had any experiences in a funeral home that you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. If you liked this video, please indicate by giving it a like, and if you're keen for more creepy videos like this, please subscribe to my channel, as I intend to make more regular videos of a paranormal theme. Thanks for watching, and until we meet again, sleep tight.